Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Joyce Rojas.
This episode is brought to you by Latin Excellence. Visit latinexcellence.com. That's latinxcellence.com or latinxmovement.com to learn more and shop our merchandise. You are excellence. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Louis, and I'm your host. Today is a special Hispanic Heritage Month edition. Welcome. On My Way to Wealth is here. Hispanic Heritage Month is here. Let me tell you a little bit about the month and why it takes place, how it came about. And then I have a very special guest with me today, which I'm very excited. I think you're going to find a lot of what she has to share super, not only useful, but inspiring. So Hispanic Heritage Month takes place from September 15th to October 15th every year as a time to recognize and celebrate the many contributions, culture, and extensive histories of the American Latino community. It first began as Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968 and later on became Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988. Since then, the month has been celebrated nationwide through festivals, art shows, conferences, community gatherings, and much more. The reason it starts on September 15th is because it celebrates the independence days of several Latin American countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua on September 15th, Mexico on September 16th, and Chile on September 18th. It also includes holidays that recognize Hispanic contributions, such as the Virgin Islands Puerto Rico Friendship Day, which is celebrated in the U.S. Virgin Islands the second Monday in October. For this month, I'd like to highlight individuals that have made a great contribution in their profession and the community at large. And today, I'd like to introduce you to Joyce Rojas. Joyce has positively impacted thousands of people's lives by shifting their relationship with money. She's the national and international bestselling author of 31 Badass Money Mindset Affirmations, which we're going to talk about, has been a top financial advisor at Fortune 500 companies, holds a master's in business administration, and recently opened up her own investment firm. But what she's most proud of is the journey of these accomplishments. As a daughter of immigrant parents, she never learned about investing. And as a single mom, she struggled financially and wondered how she'd do all this on her own. But it was in this process where she realized that wealth begins with mindset, and she successfully redesigned her life, which you're going to hear about, and it's amazing. She now combines her financial expertise with personal growth strategies to effectively teach others how to make, grow, and manage money without working so damn hard for it, in her own words. So, bienvenida, Joyce. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. So glad that we connected. I love what you're doing. And I see you out there in Instagram world telling people how it is. So,
keep it real, Louis. I'm keeping it real.
Yes, I love that. I love your approach. So tell us about part of your journey. You mentioned, immigrant parents. Like, tell me a bit about, take us back to your upbringing.
Yeah. So yeah, my parents are immigrants. They came here from Ecuador, and like a lot of us Latinos, right? Our parents came with this dream, and my parents' dream was just to have a better chance for themselves in the U.S. and a better chance for us, giving us the education that we needed. And my dad was a blue collar worker. He was a carpenter. Mom was an at-home mom, and my dad really believed in education. So he would work his ass off to provide for 4 kids. Why they had 4 kids, I don't know, because me with one is enough. But but that was really we grew up in the household where things were very tight. We were a low-income family, and my dad believed in education, and he did everything he could to give us the best education.
Yeah, same here. I came from the Dominican Republic, and it was the same. My parents never even finished 8th grade, but it was hard work. And then they wanted us to pursue the education that they never had a chance, And it's amazing because, you mentioned 4 kids. I'm one of 6. I'm the youngest of 6. And I'm like, how do they do it?
How the heck?
There's just no way you could do that, right? Can you imagine?
Not now.
So you mentioned how hardworking your parents were. Can you tell me a bit about your first money memory as it relates to that?
You know what? I think one of my first, I have a lot of money memories, and you know that I focus on the mindset piece of it, and I think a very big part of how we use money today really stems back to things that happened in our childhood. And so one of the first money memories I have is my dad was working 2 jobs, and he really just got maybe like 4 hours of sleep. And it really hurt my feelings to see him come home dusty and dirty and exhausted. And he'd want to just, all he did was come home, eat, is maybe 30 minutes with the kids and my mom, and then just go to sleep and then wake up and do it all over again. And it really just kind of clicked in my head where I wondered what the heck he was doing wrong, right? Like, why were my friends well off and my dad was just like exhausted all the time, working so hard, and we still didn't have things that we wanted. We wouldn't go on trips. We wouldn't go on field trips. There was no Secret Santa for us. There was none of the things that the normal kids do. Birthday parties we did because there was not much money around. So I remember that kind of clicked with me where I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is it that they're doing right and my dad's doing wrong? Okay. And so that I remember was a memory for me. And that kind of got me on my journey of learning about money. I wanted to really understand it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in your book that we can't afford it. Did that become like a standard for a lot of things?
Yeah. We hear that a lot, and I would hear that all the time, and it kind of just became this piece of who I was. And these little things that we tell our kids that we think is, not a big deal, is a big deal, because that became part of my identity. Someone that couldn't afford to do these things. And so I had to work on my mindset later on in my 30s when I really discovered, like, oh crap, there's a lot of things that are just kind of stuck with me that I have to get rid of. And so that we can't afford it mindset had stuck to me.
Yeah, I think identity is so important because I believe that you start acting in accordance with how you see yourself. And if you have that piece of we can't afford this and money is hard to come by, then you're probably going to attract that, right? And continue to operate within that mindset. And I know it's probably not what people are used to hearing from financial planners.
Right. It's not. But, you've worked in this industry for such a long time. And I noticed when I was in the banking industry and investment industry, I would talk to clients and I would say, hey, do exactly this and you're going to get yourself out of debt. Do exactly this and you're going to grow wealth. And they wouldn't. They would try, but then they would fail. And I realized that the reason behind that is because we all have a financial thermostat. And that financial thermostat is going to go back to exactly the temperature that was created back when you were a kid, right? So if we have this thermostat in our head of living paycheck to paycheck, and that's what we saw when we were kids. And that's what we experienced really growing up and even in early adulthood. Well, even if a parent passes away, let's say, and leaves us $1 million, and I've had this happen to many clients, that they're left an inheritance, it goes so fast. 3 years down the line, it's done. But that's because that financial thermostat is telling you in the back of your head, this is not you. You live paycheck to paycheck. So you'll find a way to live paycheck to paycheck again. And we see that with lottery winners too.
Oh, yeah. I think the percentage of lottery winners that end up going broke or even bankrupt, it's significantly, it's like over 70%, I believe.
Yes, it is. It is. Yep.
Yeah. And I think mindset plays a huge role. I think that you're so right. There's people that I've seen as well where they have increasingly raise their income streams over time or just their revenue in general by advancing in careers and whatnot. And they do find a way to fill that void to the point where even though they're making 3-4 times as much, somehow they still live in paycheck to paycheck because now they just drive the bigger car, have the nicer house.
Yes.
But they didn't have the mindset to make, for example, the savings habit something that was just ingrained in them. It was just more like, how am I going to spend this new money? Okay, I got it. Yeah, I'm going to buy a nicer car and take more trips.
I'm going to upgrade. But what's so cool about that, right, is that people don't think about the behavior part of money. And that's really what I focus on when I work with clients is, all right, let's look at the behavioral piece of this. But there is a behavior part. There's a pattern within our brain that has us really think about the right now. We are wired to think about the current situation and not the future situation, because back in the day, when we were cavemen, there was like, okay, there is an animal about to eat me right now. What do I do? So we're wired to think in that way, in the taking care of the now versus taking care of the future. And so because we're wired that way, then we will think about, oh, this is what I want now. So we'll spend on the now versus saying, I'm going to take this portion of my money and put it away for the future. So it's really kind of going against how we're wired and just beginning to build habits that really go against that part of the mind and plan for your future.
Yeah. And I think that's where affirmations come in to play a big role to kind of, maybe you mentioned, rewire your brain, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask you, how did you come about the concept of positive affirmations? I don't know if it originated. I know you had a near-death experience a while back. If you could tell us a bit about that and then how that evolved.
Yeah. So it was actually during the Great Recession, if you remember that, back during 2008. 2008. Oof. And I was working in the banking industry, but at the same time, so it was confusing. We didn't know what banks were going to be closing, what was happening in that industry. It was just crazy. And at the same time, I was going through a divorce. And it was not a nice, amicable divorce. And so it almost felt like every part of my life was kind of falling apart. And I remember going to work one day and it was just like a normal day, but all of a sudden I'm sitting at my computer and the electricity goes out in the building. And I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? So the electricity didn't come back on. So I figured, all right, let me just get up, go get a cup of coffee. And so I left. And as I crossed the street to get coffee, I get hit by a pickup truck. And that's where I'm just like, my whole life changed, because I remember the two thoughts that kept haunting me. One of them was, is this it? Like, that was all my life. I just felt bamboozled, right? I felt like I hadn't been given the chance to really do what I was supposed to do on this earth. And the second thought that kept haunting me was, what kind of morning did I have with my son that day? And he was, I think, in pre-K at that point. And I couldn't remember whether it was one of those crazy mornings or whether it was, a good morning that he had given me a hug, or like, was it one of those mornings where I made him cry because I was so anxious and stressed out? And I was already, going through a divorce. I was a single mom. And so that really did something to me, because I could have died that day and I would have left that bad memory in my son's life. And I couldn't remember. Like, how do you not remember the person you love the most, whether they hugged you that morning or not? And I realized that I was just going through the motions in life and I was sleepwalking through life. And so I remember that whole time that I was going through this change in my life, and I ended up leaving my house. I lost my house. So it wasn't like, oh, I sold it for profit. It was in the middle of, the housing crisis. I remember leaving. I sold everything for pennies on the dollar. I felt like such a loser. And I came back to Jersey because I was living in California at that time. And coming back to Jersey, there was so many thoughts in my head that kept going and really just shooting myself down, right? And I started changing those thoughts. And so that's where the affirmations came in. I realized that later, years later, that's what I was doing, is I was affirming myself. When bad thoughts would come into my head, I would tell myself, no, everything is going to be okay. I'm a strong person. I'm capable of doing this. And those I am statements are affirmations. It's all it is. But many of us use it to say, oh, I'm so stupid, or, oh my gosh, I'm such a klutz, or I'm old. all of these things that go through our head are the wrong things versus the right things.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you survived that. I'm sure you came out much stronger on the other end, and the world is a better place for it because of the impact that you're having with your clients and just the community at large. So thank you for sharing that. I remember you saying in your book, it was you in the car in a cooler, and that's all you had. And you were like, all right, I'm driving back to Jersey. I have no idea what I'm doing. And then you would just drive and say affirmations and even let out a cry or two here and there when your son was sleeping in the back.
Yes, my kid, my car, and a cooler. That's all I had.
Wow, unbelievable. So tell me about how important it was to have a support system around you, family members or mentors, especially during that transition period for you.
That it was a godsend, and that's one thing that I tell people. That's one of the key things is to have the right people around you. And we need different types of people. We need the right people in like our business world, right? And like mentors and entrepreneurs that are similar to us or people that are visionaries like us. And then we need the emotional support, like our family members. And that's a godsend. If it wasn't for my family members, I don't know. I don't know if I would have made it through that time. Like I probably would have gone insane. I don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what about now that you're not in crisis mode? Do you still affiliate yourselves with either mentors or peers that continue to provide ongoing support?
I always look for mentors. I really do believe in that. I believe in masterminds as well. A group of people that just get together and you tell me, what's your challenge? And there's 5 minds think better than one. So I really love that concept. And then when it comes to emotional support, yeah, I have the people that I tap into. I tap into my sister. I tap into my mom, my dad, my brothers once in a while. So I really do need that support because as entrepreneurs, you're an entrepreneur, it gets lonely. It is not easy. People see what we post on Instagram and Facebook and your podcast. And, they're like, oh, they're doing really good. They don't see all the BS we go through to get those videos out. They don't see, they don't see me crying because I'm like, what the hell? I feel like a hamster on a wheel. They don't see any of that. They don't see the loneliness. They only see the end result. And they think, oh, wow, she was positioned correctly, or, he must have gotten help, or no, it was just continued, consistent, grind. And that's what I think people don't see.
Yeah, thank you for being real about that because you're so right. Especially as a solopreneur, it is so hard out here to run a business, right? Because you're working with clients, you're running your own business, and then on top of it, you wear so many other hats, right? Marketing, getting videos out, it's compliance, it's so many things.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I've had days I wanted to just throw in the towel and be like, maybe I should just go get a job somewhere and just clock in and out.
Yes, absolutely. It's just like, what? All these things like you wouldn't have to do. I tell my friends this, that it's tough because having a business is like having a child on your own. Being a solopreneur is like having you're birthing a baby. It's like from nothing to creating this institution, creating this vision. It's birthing a baby as a freaking single parent. And you know what? I did that already. So
right.
It's like now I'm doing it again. So it gets really tough to deal with that.
Yeah, and it's funny because you have many babies. You have your actual baby, you have your company, and you also have your book, right?
Yeah.
31 Badass Money Mindset Affirmations. So let's talk about it. Beautiful photo, by the way. I love that.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the book. How did that come about? What made you decide, you know what? I need to, these affirmations work for me. I want more people to know about them and be empowered.
Well, what's really cool about this book is that it almost kind of, came to me through divine intervention, if you will, and I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer of God. And I'm a big believer that, we should follow intuition. And so during the pandemic, I saw the fear, right? People were fearing their health because of COVID. People were fearing their wealth because the market went down. And then the third thing that was happening is your mindset was getting screwed. I mean, you were not allowed to see the people that you loved. You weren't allowed to go to the gym. You weren't allowed to do the things that you really enjoy. The kids weren't even allowed to go to school and see their friends. It was really like just your mindset was really getting messed up from all places. The news was just consistently negative. So I saw that, and I remember back in 2008, if you remember the amount of suicides that happened, it was crazy. There was a statistic that showed that for every 1% increase in unemployment, there was a 1% increase in suicide.
Wow.
And that is ridiculous. And so that hit me because I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to trigger a wave of suicides again because of what's being affected, right? And so that's what made me think, like, what should I do? And I remember getting that like intuitive hit. What worked for you was the affirmations. And so I started writing. It was during the pandemic. And I remember going to Mexico during the pandemic because I was like, not gonna stop me traveling. So I left. I stayed there. I think it was about a week and a half, and just kept writing. So yeah, that's how the book came about, and it was really designed to help people change their mindset around not only money, like rewire their money mindset, but about themselves, because that's a very big part of how you handle money is what you think about yourself. And then the third thing is what you think about the world. Is the world here to hurt you, or is the world here to help you? And so it was really just to kind of help people shift their mind around that.
Yeah, you make a great point because, like you mentioned before, like you can go on Google and get the answers to pretty much any financial question you have, right?
Exactly.
But the perfect plan without the proper mindset or behaviors behind it, it's not gonna succeed. So it's so important to have that behavioral and mindset component to it as well. I got introduced to affirmations by reading the Napoleon Hill book, Think and Grow Rich. And it was a foreign concept, and when I was reading your book, I was like, you mentioned how like, hey, you may feel uncomfortable doing this, and that's okay. It's probably even good that you are, because you want to make it to the point where like you're testing yourself beyond what you think you're capable of, right? Yeah. So I love that part. And the other piece is too that I love the fact that you don't sugarcoat either, because it's not just like, hey, think positively and everything will be all right. Like you were like, no, I'm not going to make this easy on you either.
Yeah. Because that's not reality.
Yeah. And I see that in your videos too. You're like, let me tell you how.
Yeah, I know.
Let me tell you the real about this.
You.
Yeah. I love that though, because it's like, look, this isn't easy, but if you think about like even athletes, right? The people that are the best at what they do in the world, they still surround themselves with a coach and a support system. It's not like, okay, I'm Michael Jordan and I'm the best and that's it, right? It's like,
you're right.
They have a whole team around. I mean, Muhammad Ali used to say he was the greatest, right? Until he became the greatest.
Yeah.
But he didn't do it alone,
You're right. And you make a great point. And those are the best people. But guess what? They still had coaches. So it's super important to surround yourself with
yeah. And I think what's important about it, even if you don't have access to these people, like just reading books, right? Like reading your book, reading Think and Grow Rich, there's a ton of stuff on YouTube that's available, just about, that you can just make that part of your habit. I do a couple of morning routines myself, and that involves reading. I had the bad habit of the minute I woke up, and I slip every once in a while, immediately looking at my phone.
Yeah.
And I feel like that sets the tone for the whole day. Like you're in reaction mode.
You're right.
And now it's more like, hey, you know what? No, the first half hour, no phone. I'm going to read. I'm going to do breathing exercises. I'm going to meditate. Do you have any particular morning routines that you feel that work for you?
You're going to laugh at my morning routine, but one of the routines I have is, believe it or not, I allow myself to sleep until my body wants to sleep. Like I won't wake it up at 5 a.m. I just won't, unless I have a flight somewhere. I won't. And I schedule my day around the opportunity to just allow myself to sleep because I know that my body needs that. And I don't want to be living the way I used to before, where it was constantly at the moment I woke up, it's like, okay, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to do that. Nope. I give myself time to just drink my tea, drink my coffee, read the news. I am a big news reader. I always know what's happening in the
Me too.
market. Always. But I want to read it and like, okay, I'm chilling. That's the biggest thing for me. I also I prime my mind. So if I'm feeling down, I kind of like, I'll talk to myself. I'm very big with that. So I'll tell myself, okay, like, what are you feeling right now? All right, I'm feeling, demotivated. What's the thought behind that feeling? So I'll really understand what I'm feeling, and then I'll kind of work on switching that to just prime myself for the day.
Got it. Yeah, that's so important because you can't let outside influences, it's hard, but
It's super hard.
it should come from within, right? Your own happiness.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
hard, but
It's very hard, especially in our field. I feel like because we take on burdens, right, from our clients. We're trying to solve issues, and then just the
yeah.
news, right? Even if you try to go in the news fast, like you got to keep up with the markets.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. We are so solution based in our industry. It's like we're trying to solve people's, retirement gaps. It's like that's what we do all the time. But it's also this other piece where it's like I feel honored that my clients have trusted me with their life savings. That's your life savings, and you're trusting me with it. So yeah, so that's a lot of pressure. And then there's certain things that we need to understand we don't control. We don't control the stock market. We don't control the Fed. We don't control Biden. We don't control any of those things.
Right.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's one of the things I've learned, how to basically not let the things you can't control affect you, right? Like you do your best. And eventually, yeah, if you need to change course and work hard, then you do so, right? But ultimately, sometimes you've done all you could.
Exactly.
And you can't be too hard on yourself. You just pivot if you need to.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny because the one thing I learned, Louise Hay, I don't know if you read any of her books, but she said, we get scared of making decisions, of making the wrong decision. But if you make the wrong decision, then just make another decision.
Yeah,
It's as simple
that's
as
true.
that.
One thing I started doing with my clients now, based on that, it's asking them, what is the worst that can happen? Because a lot of the times clients are afraid to make a move, and sometimes it's they have the means, but they're afraid. Like, should I really be buying this home? I don't, I'm like, the numbers show, yes, you could afford it. Everything's fine, right?
Yeah.
But they're still afraid. And sometimes you actually have to push people that way too, where they got to a point where they have the means, but they're just still too afraid to even enjoy themselves because they're thinking like, I just want to keep all this money. Like, and sometimes they're, hey, listen, it's okay to take that trip,
Yeah.
So it's good, like, to reframe it. Like, what's the worst that could happen if you do take this decision? I mean, it's usually nothing that could never be undone, or some, there's always like that opportunity to change course later.
Yeah.
For the most part, and I think it's a big part of our job to help people see that as well.
Yeah. And I love that because just brain wise, you're doing something there. You're getting the client to stop the emotional piece of it and think. So they're using a different part of their brain when you ask them that question. And in having them use a different part of their brain, then you can actually go in and say, okay, you can have them see that they're being emotional around certain decisions. So it's pretty cool. You're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to drill down a little bit about mindset, especially in the Latino community.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see your experience with it in terms of like the wealth gap that currently exists in the US,
Mm-hmm.
And generational wealth, right? In particular, I have found that a lot of the times, because of people's past experiences, it really, like you were saying, impacts their decisions going forward. And a lot of the times, somebody that didn't have much growing up, for example, and now they have the means because they have a nice career, they're making good money. Kind of like they're focused on like, well, I never had this growing up, or my kids never had this growing up. I never had this growing up, so I want my kids to have it. And the focus become on enjoying today, but which is nothing wrong with that, obviously. But there's a way of doing it, right? But sometimes to the extreme where they're jeopardizing their future selves, or even having a strong structure for their kids to then continue that and grow the generational wealth, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Just in general, like generational wealth, the mindset behind that?
I think there's a couple of things. I think, yes, there is like our generation, right? You and I, if I look at my son, my son doesn't have to go through the crappy times I went through. My son doesn't have to worry about certain things I worried about. He has a college education fund. I didn't. So there's certain parts that he may not have the same hustle I have because the mindset is different. And so I think that's one of the things that I find with a lot of people in our generation is that they're trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to guide my kid so that they're not like lazy or, just dependent on me, that they have some type of hustle, they have a vision, they have ambition. So I think that's happening with our generation. But I also feel like you don't know what you don't know. So in growing up, I didn't know all the opportunities that I had. All I wanted when I was a kid was to be able to live in a place where they won't steal my bike if I left it outside. So sometimes we don't really know what the opportunities out there are. And so I think that's where planning comes into place and finding a neutral party. I really do believe every single person needs to have a planner on their side. It's one of the, where you mentioned, mentorship. That's one of the people you should have. You should have a great accountant. You should have a great planner or financial advisor because they're going to see certain holes that you're not seeing. And generational wealth is a hole they'll see. They'll see like, okay, what are you doing for your kids? What are you doing for yourself? And then what type of mindset are you passing on to your children? Because if you're ignoring this, then your kids are going to ignore this. But they won't have the same issues you had growing up. So they may not be in a rush to try to figure things out the way I was,
Yeah, very true. Yeah. And if you don't instill certain principles, even if they do inherit whatever you manage to accumulate during your life and pass on to them, they might just squander it away anyway, right? Just
right.
Because they don't have the principles behind it. So it's very important to start with them at a young age, for sure.
Yeah. Talking to them, helping them understand money, helping them understand what they want, helping them understand consumerism. I think that's one thing we miss. Like we miss that we have been really just we've been brainwashed, right? We've been brainwashed by consumerism to think that the latest is the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's not true. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important for people to understand and help their children understand. And also to help them understand that the amount of money that they have and the things that they have do not define them. They're not defined by that. They're defined by their value system, not by how big your house is, not by what kind of car you have, not by your latest iPhone. That's not what defines you, not by your social media. That's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm. You only see the good stuff in there.
Yeah. So I think that that's a very big thing is helping your children also understand how to define themselves and gain confidence from inside versus outside.
Yeah, I really love that. Yeah, I think consumerism is certainly a problem combined with social media. People trying to keep up. And before it used to be just with your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like everybody's taking beautiful trips everywhere.
Yes. And you're like, damn, what am I doing wrong or what?
Yeah.
Nothing, And it's so funny because you and I are planners, right? So we see with a paper. We see the numbers behind these pictures, don't we? And the numbers, exactly, the numbers, that's what people don't know. The numbers don't look as pretty as the pictures do. I know a lot of people that look like they're millionaires from the outside, but then I look at their numbers and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you make such a great point about like not having the latest, like to give you an example, like usually I buy certified pre-owned vehicles, because my thought process is I'm getting a car that's like 2-3 years old, one owner, still in the warranty, low mileage at a way lesser price. And it's still sometimes even the same model that's currently out, maybe one behind, like who cares?
And on the same way.
Yeah. And like I've had my iPhone I think I still have the XS or whatever. They're up to 14 now, but I haven't had a payment for years.
Right.
Because all those little things add up, So do we pay $1,400 for the new iPhone, or do we buy 5 shares of Apple? And I think that's a great conversation to have with the kids too. I'm like, hey, are you okay keeping your 13? But maybe you can make this investment instead. Look how it's performed the past couple of years. You might make enough to just buy yourself the next latest iPhone later, right?
Exactly. That's a great idea. Yep.
So yeah, I love that, the whole concept of mindset. So let's talk about some fun stuff.
All right.
I've seen on your Instagram, you posted some dancing videos. So what is your favorite music to dance to?
Bachata.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Any favorite artists, Aventura or?
No, I don't have a favorite artist, but then I recently discovered there's 2 different types of bachata. There's bachata traditional, right? Tradicional. That's like from DR, right?
Yep.
And then there is Bachata Sensual, which started in Europe. And it's a completely different concept. It's still the same count, the 1, 2, 3 tap, 1, 2, 3 tap, but there's a lot more body movement in it, which is really cool. And so that's my favorite.
Yeah, in Spanish we say hebilla con hebilla. So like the 2 buckles of both people's belts basically touch it, right? Because it's so close.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly evolved. I remember growing up in DR as a kid, it was always like so like dramatic. There was so much pain in the original bachata all the time. It was like somebody just like a breakup or like crazy heartbreak.
Someone cheated on you or something. Yeah. That's depressing.
It sure was. Yeah. So it certainly evolved. What about food? Do you have any specific dish or cuisine that you love?
I love Cuban food. Arroz con gris with yuca con mojo and pernil. That's like my favorite. But if I was like dying tomorrow and I was to ask like for my last meal, I 100% would go with my mom's traditional Ecuadorian food. Una sopita, de plátano. That'd be my thing. Yep.
I've had that. I forgot the name of it. It was one that they added shrimp to it. The plátano. And I was like, oh my God. Because, Dominicans, we have the mashed plantains, mangú.
Yeah.
And this was similar, but it had like shrimp in it. And it was like kind of like a thick plantain soup with shrimp.
Did you eat it with rice?
Huh?
You ate it with rice?
It might have, yeah, because I think that's what gave it like that consistency, like an asopao.
Sango de camarón.
There you go. Yes. Oh my God, that was amazing. Yeah, one of my brother's friends are from Ecuador. It was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly I would love to eat like that every day, but then my body would not really love that.
Yeah, you gotta keep your girlish figure.
Absolutely. So where can people find you? Social media. I'm gonna put a link in the show notes to your book and all your social media, but for people listening, where are you, or do you live on social media?
So Instagram is a big place I'm at. I have a YouTube channel too, if you look me up, and then my website, joycerojas.com.
Okay. Awesome. I will put a link to joycerojas.com and all of your other social media and YouTube channel as well. One last question before you go. If somebody met you in an elevator for a very short ride, they don't know your website and they'll never see you again, what are some things that you wish you can just kind of bestow upon them, some wisdom you've learned throughout your years? You say, hey, listen, we're never going to speak again. Here's what my theory about life, or something I've learned, anything that they might find useful. What would you share with them?
I would say that they are here for a purpose. I think that all of us are here with a God-given purpose. And we know what our purpose is deep inside. We just choose to sometimes ignore it because we're afraid that we may not be good enough for it, or we don't know how we're going to get there. But we are here to impact not only our lives, but the lives of others. And there's no doubt in my mind that you are meant to be here by design. And I'm a big believer of living your life that way.
I love that. Yeah, it's so impactful because, unfortunately, so many people don't really like what they do on a day-to-day basis in terms of work, right? And it's such a huge chunk of time in your life. So I feel like finding that purpose, or you may already know it, maybe doubling down on it. And that may mean even making less money initially, right? To follow that path.
Yeah. And then, I mean, what if it is, making less money? Like, I mean, I came from the corporate world. I was making amazing money. I just knew that wasn't where I needed to be. And I knew that if I left, I would probably make less money, right? Most likely make less money. But I calculated, how much do I really need to be able to be happy and sustain a fair lifestyle, right? And once I calculated that, and I said, okay, all right, so if this is going to be the amount that I need, I don't really need to be making the amount that I was making before, right? So I was comfortable and I had reserves. That's why I'm a big believer, like, got to have reserves. So I planned. And so I left, and lo and behold, I'm making the same amount of money, if not even more, this year to come, which is a beautiful thing. Because when you think about, I'm going to leave corporate and I'm going to go into entrepreneurship, you think, all hell's going to break loose. But it actually I ended up in a way better situation, not only financially, but also emotionally and time-wise, right? Because time is really the only currency we do have.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
And like I said earlier, thank you so much for everything you do for the Latino population. I think you're such a leader in our world, in the financial industry, but also in the whole Latino population. This is amazing what you're doing. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for some other amazing speakers that I'll continue to have on the show for the rest of the month for Hispanic Heritage Month. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.